Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Activities for People Living at Home with Dementia. My name is Martha Brown, and I am your volunteer with Dementia Friendly Fort Worth. We are proud to offer this series with funding from the Area Agency on Aging and the United Way of Tarrant County. These programs are recorded and are made available for viewing through a YouTube channel for future use. I am your host for today's activities. Our topic today is brought to you by LaShawn and Bethany. I'm so sorry, I had a brain burp there. With the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History, we're going to hear them talk about and show us birds of the Metroplex. So, LaShawn and Bethany, take it away.
So LaShawn's going to be our presenter today. My voice is lower. I don't project as well as everyone, so she'll probably do a better job. But LaShawn is our science collection manager. The titles are always kind of like cloudy, but that's what they do. They manage our collection. So she's going to present to us on the birds of the Metroplex. So I will actually pass it over to LaShawn and enjoy the show.
Thank you, Bethany.
Well, it's great to see everybody. Just like Bethany said, my name is LaShawn, and I've been at the museum for over 25 years. So I've been really accustomed to working with the collection, and I'm very happy I can share it with you today. And we're very fortunate at the museum to actually have bird specimens because we're actually required by law to have permits for them. So any kind of bird skins, bird nests, bird eggs, bird feathers, any kind of bird parts, they're protected by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and also Texas Department.
LaShawn, I hate to interrupt you, but I'm not the only one having trouble hearing you. And we don't want to miss a word. I missed about half of what you just said, and I'm sorry.
All right. How's this? Is this better?
Group? Okay, much better. Thank you, LaShawn.
You bet. You
bet. Okay.
So working in our collection, I have a lot of use with the taxidermy that you see and also our flat skins. And I was saying that we're fortunate to have them in our museum because actually birds are protected by law. There was a law that went into in the early 1900s that if you had any kind of bird parts, whether it's eggs, feathers, nests, even the skins themselves, you had to have a permit to have them, and we still continue to that today. So we always check in with Fish and Wildlife and Parks and Wildlife to keep our permits current. So I want to share with you a couple of the birds that, not all the birds, but some of the birds you see in the Metroplex. And it's a great spot where we're in because if you think about where Dallas-Fort Worth is, right, kind of in the north central Texas, we actually hit 4 different major habitats. So we've got the Great Plains from the north. On the east, we have the forests, like the big piney woods. We also have the desert and prairie lands coming in from Amarillo. And then up from the south, we have the coast. So it's a perfect meeting place to where east meets west. And then the 2 different climates or major climates can come. So we get a lot of birds that travel in here, especially through migration patterns. And so what's really neat is that it's been recorded over 550 birds have been actually recorded in our state, whether it's once or whether they're just a continuant migrant through our city. So it's pretty fascinating. And I wanted to share with you one of the birds that's been really popular in the news lately. Has anyone ever or have seen news stories about the robin? Has anyone ever seen so many robins?
Yes.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
And does anyone know why we have so many robins at this time?
No.
Migratory patterns?
Migratory patterns, definitely. Anything else? Why are we seeing so many robins?
Mating season?
Mating season. That's a good idea. Yeah. Let's do
Maybe
one.
they're having a convention.
Everybody likes a convention, right? So what they found is that we're getting so many because they're actually looking for food. So they're trying to survive during that last bit of winter and that early onslaught of spring. And so that's why whenever we see the robins, they kind of fit in pretty good with those sayings about the early bird gets the worm, because what they love to really feast upon is earthworms. And then they also give us a night bright sign of spring coming. So you can see that they've got that they're named for that big red breast that they have. They're actually part of the largest thrush. So if you've heard of the thrush family, that's part of the robins.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Can you bring that closer?
Sure.
I'm just making you do all kinds of weird things today.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
Thank you.
Kind of a sharp yellow beak. You can kind of see that, kind of that ruddy color on their chest.
And then those dark brown feathers. And both the males and the females look very similar. Usually the females are a little bit paler in coloration. So that's a good view of the robin up close.
When you asked if we'd heard about birds lately, I was thinking about those birds that have been landing in someone's yard that they can't be touched, and they're pooping all over the street. And
The
white
Egrets.
egrets, yes, and grackles.
Yeah.
grackles. Yeah. You can't tell me grackles are got to be protected. They're like flying rats.
I know. They're all over the place.
They are. They congregate everywhere, and it's just like they carpet, anywhere they see look, and it's just totally covered with grackles. It's just amazing. I know there's a lot of deterrents, like to try to get them to, especially around businesses, they'll be out, like in trees roosting, and like you said, they poop on the ground, causes a mess. And sometimes you'll see like their security guards around the businesses. They'll go and they'll make loud noises, like popping noises, and try to scare them. And it doesn't really deter them. Like they'll fly off, but then they'll come back because there's something, whether it's roosting or great food sources available. And basically they just push them off to someone else. Make their way back in, So it's pretty funny how what we do to kind of protect ourselves, but then, the birds are just like, whatever, we're going to come back. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I've noticed sometimes that they gather on power lines too.
Yep.
Absolutely.
They like power lines.
You can see, and they're almost spaced out just even.
Yeah, it's just like those comics that you see of the birds in the line. Yeah.
I don't know if that's social distancing. I'm not sure what that is. they got it down pat.
Maybe it's a wingspan,
Getting ready.
Yeah.
Or
so they can fly off.
Space. Or yoga personal space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Space, definitely. So that's just a little bit about the robins, and because I know I watched them in my yard, and then I noticed that people are like, why are these robins all hanging out? So I know lots of news stories have come out about the robins. So it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat that we had some nests in our bike during quarantine. Oh. So there's a video on YouTube of us taking video of these American robins nesting, and they have these really pretty eggs because their eggs are like bright blue, right? Teal circling. So we had, I think, 4 eggs in the nest that we had. And they were fine with us taking pictures until the babies were actually, young. Yes. Younglings. Whitelings? Whatever they're called. Fledglings. Fledglings. That's the word. But yeah, so we had them. You could see them. You could watch them feed them. They were like right there in front of we used to hang our bike on these hooks. And now we don't, because we don't want them nesting. We have 2 young boys, and we don't want them messing with them. Yeah. So, we have some all over the way. Yeah. So it's neat because we would just see them every once in a while. But like I said, with spring coming, they're going to be out in force. And sometimes they say that they can get they come together as almost like 250,000, like just roosting together and flying over. So you'll see a lot. All right. So that's a little bit about our robin. Next, I'm going to show you a beautiful bouquet of flowers. No, actually, if you look closely, I'll bring it up. You can see that our next little specimen is the hummingbird.
The hummingbird, yeah.
You see it right here? Yeah.
Oh wow.
Feeders out in their area. Do you have any feeders or anybody that has hummingbirds come to visit?
We usually do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually, you mentioned migratory patterns. There's actually, I think it's next week, March 15th, so we'll put them in the north central Texas area. So everyone's saying, put out your feeders, and they basically like the sugar water. They love any kind of red or orange flowers. Like most birds, the hummingbirds have really great color vision, but they also can see ultraviolet spectrum. But they're very attracted to any kind of tubular
of flowers because they're wanting the nectar, that they're really wanting something sweet. And so who usually comes and flies around in our area is the ruby-throated hummingbird. And so they're pretty small. They have very, very short legs, so they don't do a lot of hopping or walking, but they'll kind of scurry up and down a branch. And what's kind of neat is that they're just masters of flight because they can hover, they can stop very quickly, they can go backwards. So to me, they remind me of kind of like a helicopter. I should say we probably designed the helicopter after them, but it's pretty amazing. And then their wings will be about 53 times as fast. So they're incredibly fast. Sometimes you'll even be sitting out and you can hear them just by a buzz. And it may sound maybe a fly or something, but if you're very quick to look, then you can actually hear them because of how quickly they flap those wings. But they also are so brilliant in color. A lot of times they're kind of like a bright green, but the ruby-throated hummingbird actually has a red patch right underneath its throat. I've got a little one here. So this one is actually a male. And right here, right below my finger, you might see a little bit of orange right above it. This is the male. You see it reflecting that red. And then let me show you what the female looks like. So here's the female without that patch.
Okay.
You have to be a really good study.
Really good study.
To see them up close to know what's the male and female, but you can see that they'll have that dark coated patch. You can also see they have a pointed beak. A lot of times it's curved down, and their beak acts like a sheath, and their tongue will actually stick out about 2 inches, or maybe even longer, to actually suck up the neck. Yeah, so we've got, and you can see how tiny their feet are. They're so small. They're very small. Yeah, so this is our ruby-throated hummingbird. And since I can show you how small they are, I also brought a cast of an egg and also their nest. So the hummingbirds make their nest in the crook of trees, whether it's a deciduous or coniferous tree.
Oh.
It's pretty small. In fact, I can probably put my thumb inside.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We lost your voice. We can't hear you.
Sean, we have no voice. Dusty, you may want to turn your volume up. We're having trouble hearing.
I got it up as far as it'll go.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear us now?
Can you hear me?
Better.
Better.
A little bit, yeah.
Can you pop it up here?
Nope.
Well, she didn't say anything, did she?
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
Say your ABCs, LaShawn.
A, B, C, D, E, F.
Okay, now we can hear you.
Okay.
So we have this hummingbird nest. Can fit my thumb just about. But what's neat is that they can also use a man-made material. So sometimes they'll build their nest around extension cords or wires, so they don't have a tree to kind of to build it. But what they'll do is they'll use materials, and you can see that it's lined very with soft plant material. And what's kind of neat is that their saliva is sticky. So not only does it help with the nest building, but they can also use it not only to use it with nectar, but also they can actually pick out insects from spider webs if they get hungry.
Oh, okay. Did not know that.
Yeah. And so what do eggs look like? So I've got a cast of one. And here's
They look tiny.
They're so small. So here's my hummingbird egg. And
Oh my gosh.
I brought a penny. I'm gonna put it behind it.
Oh, it's
that egg will fit right on top of that penny. So
No kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, very tiny.
That's something.
All right. So now we're gonna move on to our next animal. And this bird builds a magnificent home. Very different from our hummingbird. Anybody want to take a guess at who might build this one?
Woodpecker.
Woodpecker, absolutely. And what's really neat is that we can actually open it up and see the inside.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
What industrious builders they are. So they have
Wow.
to go and actually, if you look on the outside, you may see lots of holes where they try to start to find the best place. And they'll take their time and just tap and tap and tap and tap and tap until they finally found the perfect spot. And they'll enlarge that hole. And then they have to actually go all the way through, and then they'll kick out the material.
Wow. That's cool. It is.
Yeah.
Do they get all? Do they clean all the dust up, or do they leave it in there to lay their eggs on?
There's a little bit of dust, but they'll also bring in nesting material as well. This
Okay.
Because I think someone was taking their tree down, and we happened to slice it in half to see if we could see how deep it is. And it's very, very large.
That is impressive.
It is.
So this one actually comes from the red-bellied woodpecker. So let me share what he's like.
Red belly.
So here is our red-bellied woodpecker. Although he doesn't really have a red belly. Most of that red is on top of his head. So he actually has a sticky tongue too, and he can actually poke it into the bark of the tree to get his food, because usually he likes bugs to eat as well. Neat is that he actually has a very long tongue, and they said it kind of wraps around his head. And then he has kind of like a helmet, because if you're this bird and you're pecking on tough wood, you need something to protect that brain of yours in your head. So we probably got a helmet on the inside. But that's just a little bit about this magnificent bird.
That's not the kind of birds we've seen, is it?
I guess if his tongue is sticky, that helps him to clean out and hollow out the tree before he gets his nest in there. He or she. Does she's and he's both build nests, or is it the prerogative of one gender?
I think, I'm trying to think what it is. I thought the male, but I have to go check. Sometimes it's hard because it's hard to say just a hard and fast rule, because as soon as you do, they'll be, but there's an exception to that. So
there's always an exception.
Because we like to say that like all the males are bigger, except, some of the males are smaller. It makes them a little bit more faster or agile. Yeah, so it's always tricky, but yeah. So it's whenever I'm learning about birds, I try to remember their basic and their habits mostly. And I haven't really studied much of nest building, but that's my next step to get to.
According to Google, they both build the nest, but the male does most of the excavation, so like the digging.
So he'll do the work.
Yeah, he'll do a lot of work.
So, are there more than one type of woodpeckers in this area?
There is. We've got the red-bellied. We have the red-headed. We have the yellow-bellied sapsucker. We've got, I believe, the downy woodpecker, which he's very tiny. The pileated woodpecker, and he's huge. So we have a lot that come and visit this area.
Wow. Okay. We've seen the redheaded ones.
Yeah.
They've actually pecked holes in our
fascia board.
And our fascias around the house.
All right.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
And sometimes they go in a straight line too.
They do, yes.
Yeah.
An interesting factoid.
Yeah.
Don't do that, please. Don't. No.
So what is also kind of, so we talked about how they go and they peck around the tree bark to look for a good home. Well, they also, you'll see them sometimes in between the bark of the tree, or even in fence posting, they'll find a good spot where they can actually wedge nuts in there. And as they wedge their nut, to make them smaller, they'll actually use their beak to crack it.
Wow.
So into manageable sized pieces to eat. And then sometimes they'll even shove the nut inside, so they have like storage. So they'll look, okay, I'm going to store that for later, so I'll know if I ever get hungry, I can come back.
Okay.
But they use the tree in many, many ways.
Well, when what you have is a hammer, everything's a nail.
Exactly.
That's right. Exactly right.
Absolutely. So one of the other interesting things is that whenever they do build the nest, it's not necessarily for them. Other animals want to also be involved in it. Sometimes
really?
Squeeze out
I think I've heard of that.
squeeze out and want to make them their home. And let me show you who does that. It's this guy right. Anybody recognize this bird?
No.
Kind of a dark looking one, yellow beak. He's actually a European starling.
Okay.
Starling. Okay.
And when you look at him, he looks dark, but he's actually got gray and purple in his feathers. When it turns winter, you'll see them more with white spots, and they go through something called, it's not exactly a molt, but it's called wear, like you wear molt. And what happens is those white spots on their feathers from winter to spring, those white spots will wear down and they become black or dark and glossy. So they don't actually molt, just those patterns kind of just fade away, which is pretty interesting. So I bring this guy up because he's one that's very abundant, along with the grackles that we see, or blackbirds. They like to hang out in big groups. But what I found is that he's actually been introduced. He's not native around here.
Oh.
And back in the 1890s, there was a very enthusiastic group that wanted to have the birds that Shakespeare talked about in his plays. So they were totally introduced, like on purpose, to see if they could actually get them to populate in America. And it took them a couple tries, but now that's how we have starlings here in America.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because it was very successful. So, but they're kind of the ones that are they make the birds' lives interesting. Not only do they kind of move the woodpeckers out of their homes, sometimes they'll compete for food, and they'll kind of scare other ways. So they're kind of little bullies a little bit. It's interesting of how they actually got here and how they were cultivated. And what's neat is that since they equate that all these birds, the starlings, came from 100 birds when they started, and that there's very little genetic differences between California all the way to Virginia. There's very little genetic differences. So scientists are like, that could be good, that could be bad.
Yeah.
So they said it's very, very minimal.
So when were they introduced?
1890s.
1890.
Mm-hmm. By Shakespearean enthusiasts.
Yeah.
So I found fascinating. So now I have a little bit more respect about, instead of saying, oh, look at those grackles or those blackbirds, because there's probably a starling in between them. So I have to make sure I look very carefully and not be so adamant about them.
So they had a tough start.
And I don't know if it's because they were built like for the environment, or if they just couldn't. I'm not sure why it took them so many tries, but they were bound and determined to make them to try to live over here.
Well, I mean, it's kind of amazing that they've gone over 100 years and not have any major split in their gene pool.
And then, yeah, it's totally fascinating.
Sounds like East Texas. They're intermarrying.
Yes, exactly.
Forgive me, those of us are from East Texas.
Oh, I was going to say, I wouldn't say that about Texas, but maybe Arkansas, but not Texas.
It's the mountains of Appalachia and Western
North
Carolina.
Mountains, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Western North Carolina is the same way.
Yeah.
So we'll move on from some of the birds that we see through the daytime. I mean, we also see these guys too, but I normally see them when they're soaring in the air. And I'll share with you a little bit about our turkey vulture.
Vultures, yes.
Turkey vulture.
Turkey vultures. So whenever you see them, they may appear very dark, like dark colors, but if you're up close, they're actually kind of a chocolate brown. And when you look at their head, it's kind of a red color. And sometimes whenever you see them above, they make a V shape with their wings, but they seem very teetery, whether it's the thermal currents that they're riding upon, but they don't seem very elegant in their flight. And they like to be up very high because they're scanning the ground. They're looking for carrion or any kind of animal carcasses. So they're really great for us because they are the nature's recyclers. They help keep our environment clean. And what's really fascinating is that it's kind of tricky to tell which vulture you're looking at because there are also black vultures. But if you see them in flight
and you look at their wings on the underside, it looks like they're two-toned, and it's just actually a paler color, so it looks like they have like a white tip on underneath. So next time you see a vulture, just check him out and see if that's
Can I tell you a quick story about vultures?
Yeah.
I used to work at Abbott Laboratories over in Irving, and there was a couple of years while I worked there that a vulture set up nests right over the entryway.
Oh my
And we had to close that entryway, number one, because the vultures would swoop down and attack people that were coming in the building, but we couldn't do anything about it because they were protected.
Right.
So we just had to put up them while their eggs hatched, and then they flew off. But it was a real pain.
Yes.
More ways than one.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness.
We had our former president of the museum, he actually had a patio. He lived over in Ridgely Hills, and he had a patio where black vultures would come and lay their eggs. And so they had a perfect view because they could just sit in their living room.
Huh, that's nice.
And they would, like you said, whenever those little hatchlings would be out on their own, they would go away and they'd come back next season. So I think there's
that's nice.
In that. So we would all get over there, looking, watching them. And they didn't care we were looking at them.
No.
They're so used to humans, and that's kind of the interesting thing about some of these birds is that they feel comfortable. Even like cars, like you'll see some of these birds, especially you mentioned doves earlier. I'm like, this is huge car coming after you, and they're just walking in the road, and I'm like,
Yep.
They're just so used to us that
Folks, I'm going to see you later. We'll see you
All right,
tomorrow.
Steve.
Bye, Steve.
Great rest of the day.
Take it easy, man.
Bye.
Texas wins tomorrow.
I will. Good. Thank
Okay,
you.
you bet. Hey, Gail.
I got to jump off too.
You do.
Everybody, y'all take care. Love you.
Hello.
Hey,
Tomorrow, David.
Okay, and Gail's coming on, so she's going to say hi before y'all go. Oop, gone. Sorry, LaShawn.
oh, that's fine.
We're in
How
each
much
group.
does that vulture weigh?
So with taxidermy, usually they're very light, and part of the reason is because they have light hollow bones.
Yes.
So
Okay.
it doesn't feel like they're like holding anything. The thing on this is the base. The base is
Okay.
But yeah, it just feels like hardly anything really.
Okay.
And do you know why they have light hollow bones?
Why they have what?
Why they have hollow bones?
Hollow bones.
So they can
No.
fly
They can
better.
fly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If their bones were filled up, they'd be too weighty.
Yes, they would.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
It would be hard for them to get off the ground. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I actually have a split version, or we cut a wing bone in half, and I can show you what it looks like on the inside.
Okay.
Wow.
Hi, Gail.
Hi, Gail.
Oh, how is everybody?
Good to see you,
Good.
Gail.
All right, so here's our wing bone. I'm going to flip it over, and then
Wow, it is hollow.
put my finger right through the middle of it.
Huh.
Oh, my stars.
Wow.
So we bisected or dissected in two, and it's very thin, it's very delicate. But you may notice on the ends, like there's looks like little strings, and those are actually bone strands, and that's what kind of makes it more supported. So it makes it more strong.
For the joints, yeah.
Webbing, sort of.
So it's very, very thin. And so that's kind of, like you said, it's great because they can fly, but what would be a disadvantage if you had light hollow bones when you're a bird?
They break.
They break.
Exactly. No, they've got really great size. Sometimes they collide with cars if they're traveling around, or sometimes they might miss a tree. And so they break. And so it's very delicate. But what else is kind of neat about bird skeletons is that they have similar structure as we do, except a lot of the bones are fused together. And so that is stronger, even though they have that
Okay.
about them. Yeah. And they're modified. Like with the wing bone, I've got this isn't actually a cast of one. This one's of an eagle wing. And so this would be, top part. And you can see how some of the especially what we compare to our hands, how they're modified. So they've got long, slender, I guess we call them fingers. That would be the thumb. A lot of times they're fused like maybe 3 fingers into one. So that's how they make it a little bit more efficient in their body as well. Not only having hollow bones reinforced or fused, but then they also have modified bones as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. Just like fingers.
All right. Now, one of my favorite ones we had, and we also used to have one that used to live at the museum, and it's our screech owl. Has anyone ever encountered a screech owl before?
A what?
The screech owl.
Screech owl.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So where did you encounter one?
In our backyard.
Backyard.
We had western screech owls that nested back there.
Yeah. And could you identify them? Could you spot them right away?
Oh yeah. It was easy. We'd hear them making noise, which they don't say who. They do not say who.
Right.
They make a different noise.
My cousin Vinny was where I saw one.
Yeah. But no, we watched them. They came for like 2 or 3 years, and then I think that they just found somebody better than the canoe we had hanging outside my garage or my shed.
I'm glad you mentioned that they don't say who, because that's actually the great horned owl, and he's a much different owl. And they have like a trill or a winning noise. So it's interesting because whenever I worked here, I told my mom, I said, "Hey, we have a screech owl." And she's like, "Oh," because I'm part of Choctaw and Mandan, and then Choctaw believe, and or Mandan both, they believe that screech owl is a bad omen. And I'm like, really? Oh, he's great. He's fine. So mom still kind of thinks about that. She'll hear a screech owl in the distance. She's like, oh, maybe some bad news is coming. But
well, I don't think we ever had any misfortune.
Yeah, like I work every day with them, so yeah. I'm okay. But whenever I bring the screech owl out to here at the museum, they always say, "Oh, he's so cute. What a cute baby." And actually, he's a grown-up. This is the adult version.
Yeah, that's right.
Of the screech owl. And so they have those same feather tufts, like the great horned owl, the one that makes the hooting. They have those. Does anyone know why owls would have these feathers that stick up? They're not ears, they're just feathers.
Therefore, when they can take insects or something flying through the air.
That's a good
echoes.
Idea. Yeah, maybe echoes. Anyone else have an idea of why they would just have feathers that stick up?
Make them look like an owl.
That's what owls do. Owls, that's how they dress.
Not all owls have them. So there's very few that have these that stick up. And so scientists aren't sure why.
First, really?
Speaking, maybe they stick them up. So if they're sitting, because these are nocturnal animals, so maybe they're sitting in a tree, resting. And maybe if they stick them up, it'll help them blend in, maybe break up the outline of their body, because they'll have the same coloration as they do on their body as a tree. They think some of it might show them their emotions. So maybe they get upset, so they stick up those feather tufts. They're upset or angry, but they're not really sure. But occasionally they'll just have the ability to stick them up. So they're not ears. Their ears are actually hidden along the sides of their face. And if we look below these feathers, we'd actually find little holes.
Okay.
The little round holes. And you can see that there's some feathers that circulate or that are going to circle around their eyes. And those are actually, they help to bounce sound waves into their ears.
Oh, that's where it is. Okay.
You'll see them kind of fluctuate their face a little bit, and those feathers will direct sound waves into those little ear holes.
Oh.
So are owls more intelligent than the average bird? They're always shown as being smart, I guess.
I wonder if that's just how they look, because I know there's a lot of they've done work with crows and also blue jays that they can actually use tools. So I guess it depends on what you mean by smart, but they do really attribute this like they're all in ads, they're very smart, very wise. So I don't know. I mean, they're pretty smart at trying to find food, that's for sure, because they have to be very swift and calculating when they want to catch their food, because they're going after live prey.
Yeah.
They eat lots of rodents, especially something like the screech owl. When he's smaller, they go and they eat insects, anything they can catch, sometimes bats as well. So, yeah.
They're smart because they ask questions.
They do.
Who? Who?
Hey, there's one other thing that I was always curious about, and we never saw it with owls would live in our backyard, but what they eat, they just vomit up a casing or something like that?
They do. And you know what? I have one of those. They're called
owl pellets,
but Yeah, and they do. When I take these out, people are like, is that poop? It's not poop. Not that I'm opposed to touching poop, but no. So it's just a little furry pellet. This one's a little bit large for the screech owl. His is probably be half that size. And part of the reason is that little, I call it a pocket in their body that contains the owl pellet is smaller. So this one comes from probably a barn owl or maybe a great horned owl. But basically what it is, they eat the whole entire prey. So they eat like the whole body of the mouse, fur, bones, everything. Oh. And then it goes into their stomach, and there's two parts of their stomach. There's the digestive juices that break it down, and there's a muscular stomach. And so as the muscular stomach goes to work, it's going to separate the meat, the fat, and the muscle, what the owl needs, and it's going to separate it from the fur and bones, the ones that really can't go through that digestion. And so the rest of it goes through, and then after a while, they cough it up, and it comes out like this. And
fur ball.
And scientists go around collecting fur balls. So why would people want to go collect these things?
Because I see the bones inside of them.
And to find out what they used to eat.
It really helps us on their diet. So I'm going to break this open. Let's see what we find in here. So you can see it's very compact in there. We find little tiny bones. In fact, here's a little one right here. And then we have charts where we can identify it. So this looks like a leg.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
A leg of what?
Probably a mouse. Although they can eat other birds. So sometimes you'll find bird skulls in there. Sometimes you'll find lots of ribs. Maybe it could be part of the mouse or even a snake. And I'm seeing on the top part, looks like a skull. So that's how we can really tell. If we find the skull of this animal, then we'll know these, well, not exactly, but it'll help us give us an idea of what this animal ate. And what's kind of neat is that an owl pellet can hold more than one prey. So you might be hungry and eat 2 or 3. So yeah, so you can break them open and you can find exactly and determine what kind of bones. There we go. There's the jawbone of that one. So
oh my!
Oh, nice.
My gosh!
Like a little bit of a pointed inside of some kind of mouse or rat. Yeah.
Just remember, Woodstock. That could be you if you got outside, and I will eat you.
So yeah, so that's one of the fascinating things about it. And also you can also determine where those owls roost. Because if you look at the base of trees and you find these owl pellets all around them, then you know if you look up, there'll probably be an owl there, or that's where he makes his home. Because they usually go back to the same to digest and eat and then cough it up. So yeah. All right. We got 2 more birds on my table, and this one y'all already know. In fact, it's probably a lot of people.
Poor little microphone's having a hard time today.
It's probably a lot. These birds get a lot of people interested in bird watching and also field guides. And so what I like best about these specimens is that you can actually tell that there's a difference between the sexes. So we've got the male
cardinals,
brilliant red, and then the females that is also very beautiful, but more brown and kind of a color that it's a faded color. So why do they have these 2 colorations in the cardinals? Why are they?
Guys have to do something to get noticed.
That's right. So the males have that bright crown, that crest on their head. But why would the females be this color?
So they can hide from the
predators.
From the predators, exactly. So while she's in the nest, taking care of babies, that faded color, or duller color, will help her camouflage better along with her making sure those babies stay safe. What's kind of interesting is that they don't migrate. Cardinals don't migrate, so you see them a lot around your area, and also they don't really molt a lot. So that's why in the winter you can still see these brilliant colors on the cardinal. And I talked a little bit about some of the food items that birds have eat. So we learned about how the hummingbird likes nectar and can pick out spiders or insects from spider webs. We learned about how the screech owl can eat other animals. Based on the look of the bird beaks that you see on the cardinal, it looks like a triangle. Does anyone want to guess at what kind of food do you think they like to eat?
Seeds.
Exactly. They have that hard beak, or that triangular shaped beak to eat hard seeds. Kind of reminds me of a nutcracker. So yeah, that's one fascinating thing, is not only the colorations and where they live, but also what kind of food types based on their beak can help them choose the correct food to eat. So, yeah, so that's a little bit about our cardinal. And did you know that the cardinal is so popular that 7 states have named them as their
oh, really?
State bird?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh.
So it's really popular. They really love them. Now, who is our state bird?
Mockingbird.
Mockingbird.
I laughed because I had no idea.
Woodstock.
Woodstock is my state bird, yes.
So I have a great quote I found on the mockingbird. So it actually became our state bird on January 31st, 1927, by the Texas Federation of Women's Club. And they voted on this because not only was it abundant around Texas, but it's a fighter for the protection of his home, failing if need be in its defense like any true Texan. So I love that quote. I was like, wow. So unfortunately, we're not the only one to have this as our state bird. There's also Arkansas, Florida, Mississippi, and Tennessee. So we share this guy with other states as a state bird. So I find the mockingbird fascinating because there had this one that stayed outside my window, and he sang all night long. And I was like, oh my goodness. And he sang beautifully. And I found out that it's usually the males that don't have the mate that continue that singing on and on and on. So sad. And so, but they're great mimics. They said that if you go outside and you're listening and you hear a lot of bird songs, if you hear a song that's repeated 3 times in a row, chances are there's a mockingbird that's close to you.
That's what I was wondering. I've heard that.
Yeah. And they're continually learning songs. Some have guessed that they've learned up to 200 songs.
Wow.
Not only do they mimic other birds, but they can mimic the screeching of car tires. They also have, some biologists have recorded that they can mimic 20 croaking songs of frogs and toads. So it's pretty amazing how they, I guess, have that ear tuned in just right for that. But I noticed that they do also weird behavior, and I'm going to do it. I don't know if I can do it as well as the mockingbird. But sometimes you'll see them like just standing out there, and they'll just kind of move their wings up like this. What are they doing? Because if you have this bird singing to attract mates, then why is he doing this? Does anyone know why a mockingbird would do that?
No. Exercises. Calisthenics.
That's right. Showing off, right?
Yeah.
So again, scientists aren't really sure either, but they notice that when he does that, he has a little bit of white on his wing, and they think it's to scare up insects. So if you're just an insect hanging around beside him, and all of a sudden you see this thing, chances are that insect will fly or, jump up, and then that would be his great.
Oh, okay.
That's what they think. So I'm just like, that's pretty incredible. So I'm going to watch closely, a little bit more closely to see if there's any insects around. But he'll just do that for a while, and then he'll hop over and do it again. So, but yeah, I was like, that just kind of really wasn't really sure why that mockingbird did that at all. But they're making me laugh.
Now I'm going to have to go on YouTube and find some mockingbirds to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to YouTube all these birds.
Then I found one more thing I'd like to share with you about the mockingbirds. So we talk about how they make those really great noises, beautiful sounds. But they said it's not other mockingbirds that appreciate a good song. In the 19th century, people kept so many mockingbirds as cage birds that the birds nearly vanished from parts of the East Coast.
Wow. People
took nestlings out of nests or trapped adults and sold them in cities such as Philadelphia, St. Louis, and New York, where in 1828, extraordinary singers could fetch as much as $50. So they equate that about to be now $1,300.
Wow.
Yeah. So people would go out and actually kind of get them. And hold them in so that they could sing their song. But I wondered if they really did sing song, if they were in captivity.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah. So that's just a little look into our collection, a little bit about birds of the Metroplex. There's so many more. I had to keep on whittling it down. I had this huge list, but I picked out some of my favorites. I think the one that really sticks with me the most is the turkey vulture, because I didn't know much about their really influence on the environment. And I would tell you a quick story. One time we had gotten we shopped at Kroger's, and if you spent so much money, you'd get a frozen turkey. And we like turkey, but we already had like chicken and dressing ready for the holidays. And so we ate that. And then as we were cleaning it out, our freezer out for the new year, we're like, oh no, we got the turkey. We forgot. So we ended up putting out in our garden in the backyard, and we have lots of cats that come and eat and all that. And so after it thawed about, we were looking for like, what is that? And what happened is a turkey vulture had come, and he was eating the turkey, the defrosted turkey. All the cats were just like looking at him like, what? So if you ever want a turkey vulture to come, just put out a defrosted turkey.
Okay, yeah. No, we see enough vultures flying around here just from local things that get killed in the street, really. Armadillos and rabbits and things like that. But sometimes they gather in such huge flocks for one little scrawny animal, so they can't all get to it.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes it looks like they're waiting, like they're all kind of huddled around, like, okay, is it my turn? Yeah. And we saw them over, it was by the Nature Center. We were just taking a drive around, and they've got those huge power lines, and they're just big and triangular. And it looked kind of intimidating because there were probably about 7 of them. And you know how we were talking about how songbirds separate each other? Well, these are all sitting there, and we're like, oh. So it was interesting to see that. I've never seen them gather in a group like that instead of just being like around the carcass. But yeah, pretty fascinating.
Well, I know you've got enough birds you could do another series, right, LaShawn?
Absolutely. I love suggestions, so I like to take your suggestions if there's something that you want to know more.
The eagle.
Oh, the bald eagle. Yeah, we have bald eagles and golden eagles in our collection. So I can definitely.
Wow. Okay.
And I'd like to hear some more about those birds that are protected that keep landing in folks' yards.
Okay.
And what was Don? What was the kind of the bird? Was it?
It was a vulture.
Egret.
Oh, well, the one I was talking about was a vulture that's landed in. Oh, you're talking about. You're talking about the egrets, right?
Egrets that stay at 2 or 3 houses. Cowbirds, yes, cowbirds and egrets. They're in the 76109 area code and north of the W's, and they land every year and ruin the street, and then they have to start over.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear some more about what it is that makes them do that and some more history. LaShawn, if you could do that sometime.
Sure, I'd love to.
I mean, there's all sorts of waterfowl like egrets and we call them the blue ones, the blue herons, herons, yeah, and things like that that would be interesting to ducks, geese, everything like that. Yeah.
We do
have ducks and geese better scream.
Oh yeah, we can bring in the flamingo.
Yeah, we do have some I should say non-native birds as well. We have a flamingo that actually we had gotten from the zoo, so we have some unusual, but it's so beautiful, those colorings on them as well. So we can.
Well, we would love to have you back, LaShawn, and thank you so much, Bethany.
I appreciate you spending time with me today.
Oh, we absolutely have loved it. Please come back.
No, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Let's take a look, folks, at what we're going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow is the Texas winds. We're going to hear the prevailing winds, which is a combo of oboe, clarinet, and bassoon.
All right.
That ought to be really nice. Looking forward to that good music.
Yeah, I play clarinet. Well, yeah, interested in that.
So bring your clarinet, Dusty. we can probably take a look at that because you've shown us your guitar before.
Yeah, okay, I can do that.
Okay. LaShawn and Bethany, you didn't get to this second table over here on our right, your left.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I have so much. These are some of my favorite books I brought. I love books. Even though there's things on the Kindle, I still love looking through and holding them. And then so it's great because a lot of field guides, there's a lot of different way that they're organized. But this is how I got started. We had Birds of Tarrant County. It's both written by a gentleman named Warren Pewlett. And this was back in the 1960s. And this one is a little updated version, 1980s. So this one he's expanded to North Central Texas, and it covers 32 counties. So this is a fascinating book. It's more of a little bit more descriptive, not too many pictures, but he talks about what we kind of can see around here. So I bought those for great study.
Woo! What is?
I also have David Attenborough, one of my favorite naturalists, I should say. I'm gonna watch him on PBS a lot. He has actually a series called Life of Birds, and I think there's also several shows that several chapters for birds. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he would be good.
This one is kind of a bigger version of a field guide, and so basically it talks a little bit about what birds look like in terms of the habits. So this one I like because it has a lot better pictures on it. So that's just to kind of help me flip through. And this one just specifically of Texas. And then got 3 more to show.
I'm a book lover as well as a bird lover, so this is just perfect.
So these are my field guides that I use. There's a couple that, there's many authors that are great. There's National Geographic. The ones that a lot of the ornithologists use are like this one. This one's a Peterson. So Peterson does great, also Audubon as well. And then we also have Sibley. And so they're kind of the big authorities on bird behavior and then also bird identification, which we do a lot at the museum. And so they're kind of organized by groups. So you mentioned like, hey, there's lots of ducks. So we've got lots of ducks and water birds. It'll go through also songbirds. So it'll look like some of the, like the what's kind of neat is that they'll show you by family and then they'll point out specific differences. So like, this one has a little bit wider nose. Also, you can distinguish between male and female, but there's a very they also give you
wow.
So it's very detailed, but all you can have it at your fingertips. And the last one is when I'm you have bird eggs, because I know robin blue robin eggs. I know little tiny hummingbird eggs, but when it gets beyond that, so it talks about the size, and a lot of times they're actually the same size as the picture in the book. So just stick it on the book. It meets the, if it covers it, then you know, oh, that's probably the robin or the grackle egg. And then also the same thing, you can see that as real life, true to life pictures, and then also give a little bit of description of that as well. So these are the field guides and the bird egg books, what I use.
Oh, LaShawn, thank you so much. I'm glad I asked about that table. It was just too compelling not to ask the question.
I'm glad you asked it too. Yes. I always love to share resources, so I think it's important. I'm still learning.
I can tell you've done a lot of research on this, and we appreciate your expertise.
I appreciate you joining me today.
Absolutely. LaShawn, thank you so much, and you have a wonderful day.
You too. It's good to meet everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.